Hey guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined as usual by my co-host, Matt Carrolley. Today we're going to be talking quite a bit about some big news that the Falcons made today. The trading of wide receiver Mohamed Sanu. We'll talk a little bit more about some other players that are on the block, give our thoughts on sort of what trades make sense in our eyes, what trades don't make sense in our eyes. And of course, we always invite you, the listeners, to come and join us on the show. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, in the chat, the link there is available for you guys to come and join us. And, just want to give people a heads up. Our plan is to do an hour-long show. So definitely you want to get your opportunity to jump in on the show after we break down the all 22 with a couple of plays from this Week 7 loss to the Los Angeles Rams. So let's jump into the all 22 just because I know we got a lot of takes to get to later on in this episode. So, all right. So the first play that we want to look at is a couple of blitzes from the Falcons. And one of the things that I've been critical of the Falcons has been their lack of aggressiveness with some of their blitzes. This was the play that Foye Oluokun got flagged, but it was a really well-designed blitz where the Falcons used some overload pressure on the left side of the Rams offensive line, get a hit on the quarterback, with a sort of a zone blitz. You can see it better from the end zone angle.
Yeah, can we put this on full screen too, Brian? Aaron, do you have the capabilities to do that?
All right, let me remove the play. All right. Is that better, Matt?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So yeah, this is kind of a delayed, stunt here, you could say. Foy's in the A-B gap there, kind of wraps around, I believe, is Alan Bailey.
Yeah.
Kind of gets a hit on Goff, which, foolishly, the ref threw a flag on. I guess the call was that he led with his body weight, but to me, that's a clean, solid hit from Foy. And again, we haven't seen a lot of this from the Falcons this year. I mean, we spoke about it last week. Goff doesn't handle the pressure too well, and that had a lot to do with the Falcons, keeping the Rams offense at bay in the first half, and this was a great example of it from Foy.
Yeah, and this is a zone look. They drop tack to cover the tight end. Not necessarily tack's greatest strength, but a nice sort of overload where you can sort of see that because Foy loops around, they only really have 3 blockers and they have 4 rushers. You can count them: Foy, Alan Bailey, Claiborne, and Casey. Casey does a good job of hiding his rush. Gurley sees Casey, he's going to pick him up, but because Foy loops around and because Bailey has this guy locked up, he's going to get a sort of a free path to the quarterback and then gets the flag. Unfortunately, great sort of design and play by the Falcons. Unfortunately, that rule that everybody complained about last year wound up costing them on that.
Yeah, and that came on a 2nd and 10 too, so that incompletion would have forced a 3rd and 10. And I mean, we've seen how the Falcons are in 3rd and longs this year. They might have given it up, but it eventually led to first set of downs, and then the great Todd Gurley over the shoulder catch for a touchdown. So Who knows? It could have been a swing of 7 points if the Falcons could have held them on 3rd and 10, and Rams would have been forced to punt, but it wasn't meant to be, just like this season. So the other one then is another zone blitz, delayed corner blitz from the slot. KZ at the bottom of the screen there leaves his man and gets a free hit on Goff. Once again, tack dropping in coverage, kind of got out there a little late. Goff kind of missed the check down, but again, this is the reason why you put pressure on Goff and send the blitzes. Is it's not a strong suit in the pocket.
Yeah. And this is a good design. Again, you put a bunch of guys up on the line of scrimmage, make it look like any one of these 6 guys are coming. Then you actually bring a 7th guy with Casey from the slot. In terms of everybody sort of keying on these guys, these 4 offensive linemen are thinking, oh, these 4 guys are coming. So that frees up Casey on this side. And because Gurley is not blocking, he's releasing, or he is blocking. I'm sorry. He's picking up Deion Jones, who's picking up whoever Woods was chipping, I guess. or Cooks. I don't remember who's who. And so, you get a free hit on the quarterback. That was an opportunity that Goff could have gotten a free check down. And who knows, you can see from this angle, who knows if Tack would have made this play in pursuit. Possibly, maybe, if we're lucky. But, this is what, as Matt said, Goff is not necessarily known for his ability to pick up blitzes. And, dialing up more pressure against him was a good game plan. So the Falcons did do some positive game planning in this game.
Yeah, it's funny too, because both Tack and Vic were in coverage on that play. And, we've kind of made a big deal about it online at times, dropping your two guys that you invested to rush the passer. But that's what happens when you execute the call, and the Falcons did it in that scenario. So again, we haven't seen much of that execution this year, or the defense working in tandem, but that was a great example of it. And again, if we can see more of that, maybe the Falcons could have some success on defense the rest of the year.
Yeah, and the last point I'll say about that is when you drop those guys, you need to replace them with other rushers, and the Falcons did that with Deion Jones and DeMonte Casey. If you're just dropping them and only having 3 guys rush or 2 guys rush or whatever the Falcons have occasionally done, that's when you get into trouble. So this play is going to be the offensive play we're going to highlight, and this was one of the plays that seemingly live, you watch it, Matt Ryan misses badly on a deep post to Russell Gage. Do I have the right play?
I don't think you do. Doesn't look like Gage at the top of the screen. This was a play. This was a play that Charles Davis, made his point that, again, in live, he made it known that Matt missed badly, but this is the benefit of the all-22. Kind of when you look at it, we'll run it through quickly and full there. Again, it does look like Matt missed them. And I don't know if you're going to necessarily see it. This isn't the best angle to highlight what we want to highlight.
Yeah, I just want to I want to pause it here because Matt is basically throwing it away from this defender. I'll run it back in a second, but you can see sort of he's putting it in a specific window. And he's going to throw this football before Gage comes out of his break.
So right there, he's throwing it or getting ready to throw it when Gage is at the 40-yard line.
And then Gage will come out of his break around here.
So, to us, this is kind of a case where, Gage hasn't got as many reps as the rest of the receivers. So it could be, a chemistry issue, timing issue. And again, he probably didn't expect Matt either to get the ball out as quickly as he did. So, again, this kind of brings up, a point for later discussion. We are going to see now Russell Gage get some more reps. This is the type of thing that will be cleaned up more when those guys are working more together now. But, during live, it looked like a bad miss. But after looking at it and seeing how the coverage was and seeing where that linebacker was, it's not as bad of a miss and more just a communication breakdown, a timing breakdown between Matt and Russell Gage.
Yeah, Matt's throwing to a window in this zone where really none of these defenders have a chance to make a play on the ball. And this is an instance where you really want your wide receiver to sort of adjust his route a little bit, understand reading the coverages. That's one of the things that makes the transition from college to the NFL as a wide receiver difficult, having to understand those nuances and having that sort of telekinetic or telepathic, maybe not moving footballs with your mind, but telepathic connection with your quarterback of understanding sort of what he wants from you in that situation, and that sort of adjustment there. And you just kind of want to see Gage sort of sit down on that rather than running the deep post as he ran it. So that's one of the things we wanted to highlight. Not a whole lot of all other things that we can really highlight from the offense.
Yeah, it wasn't. This was probably the worst game, in my opinion, of the season. The offense, to put it lightly, was a dumpster fire. That the offensive line had a lot to do with it. Matt was under duress all game, and that's what led to some of the other misses, some of the high throws that he had. But that was a miss that I think wasn't necessarily as bad as it first seemed on first watch. But again, it's the benefit of the all-22 and one of the reasons we've kind of incorporated this feature into the show.
Yeah, so, now we've reached the point of the show where, people who are watching can join us live and chat with us. We're going to get into the Sanu trade. We're going to get into some of the injury issues. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of who else could potentially be on the block. And I know Matt has some, strong words, strong take for Austin Hooper and sort of the rumors surrounding him. But this is a great opportunity for you guys to join us for the next, 45, 50 minutes of this show as we continue to talk Falcons. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about this upcoming Seahawks game, just because there's other stuff going on with the Falcons right now. I think we all kind of just are kind of going through the motions at this point in time in the season, where it's just like, yeah, they got another game this weekend, maybe they'll win. But
yeah, at this point, the games, the results don't really matter. What will matter, what we'll talk about probably throughout the rest of the season, is kind of the development and progression of maybe some of the guys in the bottom of the depth chart that'll likely see more time. And one of those guys, as we just highlighted, is Russell Gage, due in large part to today's morning blockbuster trade. Mohamed Sanu going to the Patriots for a 2020 second round pick, which at worst, people, is going to be pick 64 in the upcoming drafts. So great value. Today's a bittersweet day. Maybe not so much for Aaron, but for 99.8% of the Falcons fan base, it's a bittersweet day. Mohamed Sanu is beloved.
He is very much beloved. That is true.
I'd say, after Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, and on some days you never know about Matt Ryan, because there's a sector of the fan base that does not like Matt Ryan, which always will baffle me. But I digress. Beyond those two, I'd argue Mohamed Sanu was the third favorite Falcon on the roster, and I don't think that's a stretch. So
I would agree with you.
To have to part ways with that, it's, again, this is why it's bittersweet. It's not the ideal ending that you want. You want to see Mohamed Sanu being on that podium with the rest of them, hoisting the Lombardi with the Falcons. Now he'll have a great opportunity to do that in New England, which is why I think it's great for both sides. But to get a second round pick for a guy that was going to likely be, in all intents and purposes, a cap casualty, great move by Thomas Dimitroff and the front office. Because again, at best, I thought a fourth round pick. I know Aaron thought even less than that for Sanu. So to get a second rounder for him, I mean, that's outstanding. And now they got to take advantage of it and make a great pick with it, because there's no guarantee. But you're definitely putting yourself in a great spot. So again, I hate to see Mohamed Sanu go. Want to thank him for the memories. That 12 gauge will always miss that. The throw to Julio in 2017 for a touchdown. I mean, that's a great memory to always have, watching him. But yeah, Mohamed, go win that ring in New England. It's going to be the one time I root for the Patriots. It's this year now, and so hopefully they can get the job done. They're looking strong. But Aaron, what you have any additional thoughts on the Sanu trade?
No, I mean, just echoing the same thing. I was, shocked, as very, very confidently thinking, best case scenario is they'll get like a 5th or a 6th round pick for Sanu. It's interesting to me that the Patriots were willing to give up so much for them. Clearly, Bill Belichick has a high affinity for Mohamed Sanu.
He's a classic do your job type of player. That's why,
yeah,
he fits them to a T.
Yes. I can say that about Mohamed Sanu. I think, there's been a lot of reports and rumors and a lot of sort of things that seem to indicate that the Patriots kind of are all in on this season in terms of, making one last run for Brady, because he's got like the option in his contract where it seems like it'd be very easy for him to walk away with all the moves that they've made at the wide receiver position. Seemingly Sanu is sort of the final piece, and maybe the one that will actually be the permanent piece, because Demaryius Thomas and Antonio Brown didn't quite work out in their favor. So I'll be curious to sort of see how Sanu does in New England. He should be productive there. He can certainly continue to put up his 3-catch, 30-yard games that were the regular thing that he would put up here in Atlanta most weeks. But yeah, it was crazy to me that they were willing to give up that much for him. And clearly Belichick really covets that dude and really thinks he's going to be a big part of sort of this stretch run. I know there's a lot of people talking about they might keep him beyond that year. I'll believe that when I see it. But certainly, he can't help their offense out at least a little bit.
I mean,
For these
seeing
next
what
9
he's
games.
done for Wes Welker and Julian Edelman, I'm fairly confident he could have that organization could have similar impact on Sanu. I mean, they like their slot receivers. They like, their guys that are somewhat shifty. And again, I think Sanu, classifying him as a shifty receiver, makes sense to me. So again, I think it's a perfect match. Again, did they overspend? Sure, but the Patriots have shown they're always willing to overspend for players that they covet because they know how to use them and all that. So I'm not going to second guess their move, especially because again, it's benefiting the Falcons getting a second round pick. But I do think this benefits both parties, especially because the Patriots, are right there and have a great shot to win a 7th ring.
Yeah, and even though I haven't said it, it goes without saying that the Falcons getting a second round pick is at least certainly if you have an opinion comparable to mine, even if you don't quite agree with me on Mohamed Sanu, is a massive coup given sort of the reality that you were probably going to cut Mohamed Sanu this offseason. So to basically get a player that at least on paper in theory has Pro Bowl potential in exchange to help you out at another position potentially, or to help you maybe package a couple of picks and move back into the first round like they did this past offseason to get some player that everybody covets in the late first round or something like that, is also on the table as well. So certainly gives the Falcons a ton of draft flexibility moving forward, and we'll just have to sort of see what they can do with that pick. But it doesn't seem like the Falcons, at least according to a lot of reports and rumors, are done in terms of talking trade. It was notable that they were reported to work out a couple of edge rushers. And the player that has been connected the most to various trade rumors has been Vic Beasley. So it is interesting that the Falcons decided they wanted to work out some edge rushers, which, as far as I know, they haven't really taken much of a look at since the end of training camp.
No.
So that seems to suggest that something is imminent as far, or maybe just simply the Falcons decided 7 weeks into the season that they weren't getting enough production from their edge rushers, which is a fair assessment, and they wanted to bring in a little bit more help. But it does sort of signal, given all the rumors that, Vic Beasley's on the trading block, that maybe a deal is imminent and they're looking for potential replacements for him. Matt, any thoughts on the Beasley trade possibilities?
Well, just to add, for those curious, the names of the guys that they worked out: Shane Ray, Nate Orchard, and Quentin Bell. Which Shane Ray would be interesting because if the Falcons did bring him in as the replacement for Vic Beasley, if they ended up trading him, bringing in a 2015 draft target in Shane Ray to replace their 2015 pick, I think that would just make for an interesting storyline. Shouldn't really expect too much from Shane Ray since he's been a bigger bust than Beasley, but a bust all in the same. And it really would just be adding a body. But yeah, I mean, it does kind of seem like they're doing some due diligence, doing some homework in case they do pull off a deal like this. And I would agree and say that Vic probably is the most likely of the remaining guys been rumored to go. I'd like to see Beasley or Campbell, one of those guys I'd like to see get some value for, because those guys are not going to be back next year. I think at best you can maybe get a 4th round pick, more likely probably a 5th rounder for Beasley. Campbell's probably a 6th round pick in my mind. I threw out on Twitter today, I think the Oakland Raiders make a lot of sense from the standpoint that, one, John Gruden's a wild card and he'll do ridiculous things. 2, they had a similar player in Arden Key that's been out with an injury. So that could be kind of a similar type of swap if you're bringing in Beasley. And then they also, lost Fontes Burfict to suspension. So again, Vic Beasley could potentially help at linebacker if they wanted to use him as a Sam linebacker. So those are my thoughts. Again, we'll see what happens. I don't necessarily expect anything to happen the rest of the week. We'll have to wait till Monday or Tuesday, just based on the fact that now, Tuesday, 4 p.m. is when player salaries become guaranteed for the week from their respective teams. So, is there still a chance maybe a deal gets done? Sure, but Falcons would then, have to still pay 1 week's salary and count that on the cap rather than, if they got the deal done before the 4 p.m. deadline. So I think we have to wait till Monday, Tuesday. But Beasley's the guy I think is most likely. Some of the other guys, and we'll get to it maybe in a little bit. I think we have a caller on the line, but Beasley I think is the guy to watch for.
Vlad, you there? What's going on, man?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hey, Vlad. Good to hear from you, man.
First off, huge fan of the show. I've been watching, you and Aaron, and even before that, when Aaron and Scott was doing it, love the show.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Yeah, as far as this season goes, I'm in full tank mode personally. I've been throwing around the hashtag Embrace for Chase on Twitter.
I appreciate that as well. Thank you. Keep that movement going.
Getting back to the subject about trade market and value and stuff. I agree as far as the trade market and who potentially could be wearing what. As far as the team goes, I think there's about 6, maybe 7 players on the team at most that's untouchable. Other than that, I think everybody else can pretty much go. That's Matt Ryan, Julio, Jake Matthews, Debo, Grady, Lindstrom, and I'd even throw like Austin Hooper on that list personally because I think he's really came into that top 5 category this year, and it's kind of hard to replace those kind of borderline.
I'm glad you brought him up because I definitely have some strong takes on Hooper, which I'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I think Hooper's definitely one. Obviously, the guys you locked up, I think recently, like Grady, Debo, Julio, and Matt, are definitely deserving of being on that list. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of untouchables. It just comes down to what's the draft what's the draft compensation you're going to receive in return, because that needs to kind of outweigh some of the dead money that is potentially going to be attributed to a guy like Desmond Trufant, who, if you trade him this week, you have a dead $10 million dead cap in 2020. Do you really want to, have
True isn't going anywhere?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm hesitant on True now. If it's a first round pick for Trufant, I'd maybe consider that.
It would really just depend on where in the first round we're talking about, mid first round. And
you're likely talking end of first round because most of these teams making the deals are contenders. So it's tough. I don't think Trufant goes. I don't think the Falcons can come to grips with that. Freeman might be one though. Devontae Freeman's an interesting one.
I was gonna ask y'all how y'all felt about what would y'all want to get from Freeman if he was actually on the trade block, or if he would be up for trade at all.
Yeah, for me, I'd start with a 4th round pick. Aaron and I talked off the air before we came on. I'm kind of using the Jay Ajayi comparison, which Jay Ajayi was traded 2 years earlier from the Dolphins to the Eagles and got a 4th rounder for him, and he was 2 years younger than Freeman is now. But I think he also had the injury concerns that I think were more severe than what Devontae's dealing with the cartilage issue that Ajayi had in his knee, whereas Devontae, people can say he's injury prone, but I think the concussion stuff was overblown. I think that some of the nicks and stuff were overblown. So I'd start the offer there at 4th, and I'd be willing to consider a 5th round pick because if you trade Devontae this week, you have a $6 million cap hold. A dead cap hold in 2020. So you're paying him. You have a $6 million cap hit for Devontae not being on the team in 2020. The deal's got to be somewhat sweet to compensate for that. And again,
me personally, like a 3rd is what I would want for him. Just because of the cap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to make this sweet for me.
I think it's going to be tough to find any team, especially in today's NFL with the whole running backs are replaceable, running backs don't matter movement. I think it's going to be tough to get a team to go with that. But if you can, absolutely. I mean, let's do it right now, maybe, because that would be great for a guy that, again, might not be on the team in 2020. It might be a cap casualty to begin with. So if you can get a 3rd, great. I'd consider 4th and 5th. It's dicey, but I'd maybe do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Matt and I were talking before we came on the show, and we were talking about that Ajayi trade and whatnot. And it's interesting sort of the point that Matt just brought up about how running backs aren't as valued as much. And the Eagles, they made that Ajayi trade in the middle of 2017. This past spring, they made a trade for Jordan Howard and only gave up like a 6th-round pick. I think it was a conditional pick that could potentially turn into a 5th. But it sort of shows sort of over the last 2 years, sort of maybe you can argue a general trend where teams are probably a little less willing to give up value for running backs as they may have been a couple of years ago. So that, could factor into sort of any potential compensation for Devontae as well.
Well, yeah, that and the market too could be swung also because of all these top end running backs that have changed. Some of these teams like Shaquan Barkley, those tops running backs that have came out and actually put up these really nice numbers, and they really made these teams two-dimensional, instead of just the one pass happy every play. So I think honestly the emergence of all these bigger running backs that have came out the last couple of years could drive Freeman's market up just slightly, not like crazy high, but I think the running backs are just a little bit more valuable than they were maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Now, because teams are starting to realize, like Christian McCaffrey, for example, like he may not be like the best like in between the tacklers runner, but like as far as like overall running back, he's probably the best out there right now. And that's the kind of running back that Freeman is. He could actually be that 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional running back, and teams seem to be kind of more inclined to picking those kind of runners up than your Adrian Peterson's back in the day that he could run, but he couldn't catch himself if he fell on the ground, basically.
Yeah, and that was the point too that I made, Darren, was that Ajayi for a 4th-round pick, he was more so a 2-down back. More recently, Jordan Howard got traded for a conditional 6th-round pick. He was also a 2-down back. I think you're right. I think Devontae Freeman is a 3-down back, so that's what you would be getting, and that's the ideal outcome if you are going to trade for a running back. So, yeah, I'm with you on the fact that he presents the most value that you can potentially get from a running back. I know Melvin Gordon's been tossed out there since he's been in trade negotiations that haven't worked out in Los Angeles. Kenyon Drake's another one. I guess the two things that those guys have over Devontae is they're on expiring contracts, whereas Devontae's not. But I think something that people do need to remember is anytime a player is taking on one of these players, there's really no guaranteed money associated with these contracts. The guaranteed money falls on the team that's making the trade. So they're not locked into these contracts at all. So if it didn't work out for Devontae Freeman, wherever he ended up going, if he was traded, there's really no long-term harm to that team to let him go. But, again, if you're going to give a 4th-round pick, you want to make sure you get a couple years at least out of them.
Yeah, no doubt. So, quick question before y'all let me go. I was on Twitter today, and take this as you will with a grain of salt. I was seeing some posts about how Mike McCarthy could potentially be the new head coach and how he potentially could snag Steve Belichick away from the Patriots. Any thoughts on that?
Steve Belichick then would be the defensive coordinator, I guess, right? That's what he's kind of commanding with Gerard Mayo.
Yeah.
I did give some takes on McCarthy. I still kind of think, and I know fans don't like that take, that he could be one of the favorites right now for the Falcons' future head coaching position.
He's definitely not at the top of my list. But
no, he's not at mine either. I just think, basically my stance is I think Arthur Blank wants a more established guy next time around, someone that's won, been to the playoffs. I'm not sure he wants to go the first-time head coach route again. And I think we can all agree he's likely going to go an offensive-minded coach since he's gone defense for so long, and there's been no fruits to that labor. So, again, that's why I think McCarthy's one of those names that's an established offensive mind. So I can see it. The Belichick stuff's interesting. I didn't see that at all, and I haven't really even considered Steve Belichick yet because I know he's really young starting out. But yeah, I wouldn't be against that. Anytime you can get some of that knowledge and wisdom, I think you got to be open to it. So yeah, I'd give it a chance, but I know other fans, especially regarding the McCarthy stuff, would be hesitant.
Yeah, Vlad, we appreciate you joining us tonight, and thank you for your thoughtful questions and insight. And I know we have another caller coming on the line in just a bit, but have a good night, Vlad.
Yeah, have a great one. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Vlad. Great
Take
talking with
care.
you. Hopefully, we talk again, man.
All right. So we have Johnny. What's up, John? You've been a frequent caller into the show. What do you got for us tonight?
Yeah, I want to get right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get right to business. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm seeing everything, and people are starting to give in on Thomas Dimitrov, and they're starting to be more hopeful towards Dan Quinn. So my question is, where do we go for a general manager?
My guy's been Ed Dodds. He's Chris Ballard's right hand man in Indianapolis. I think he's well recognized and regarded as one of the top scouts in the NFL. So I'm shooting for the stars here, and I'm going Ed Dodds. I love what they've done in Indianapolis, building that roster, and you're seeing it this year with not having Andrew Luck, but the rosters, been good around Jacoby Brissett, and obviously the coaching has been great as we saw in Week 3. But I'm going Ed Dodds if Thomas Dimitrov's out, which again I think the one thing that I will kind of say to circle back to this Sanu talk is that pulling off a move like this again, there was a lot of hesitation and pause that Dimitrov wasn't going to do anything. He was going to sit on his hands, and because they're fighting for their jobs. But to do a move like this and to set the Falcons up well for the future, I think does kind of put a W in Thomas Dimitrov's column for at least today, if not longer. So again, he's showing that he's not going to bring this ship down all the way and just continue to ride out this roster when it's seemingly not working. So I don't know if we can totally say he's done, but again, to answer your question, if he's done, Ed Dodds is my guy.
Yeah, I had a similar thought this morning that this trade, because that's one of the reasons why I've been so skeptical about the possibility of trading people, and tweeted out a couple of days ago that I think it's crazy to think the Falcons going to be sellers with all these guys sort of coaching and GMing, I guess you could say, for their respective jobs. And setting up for the next person didn't make a ton of sense. But the fact that they were able to pull off this trade at least gives credence to the idea that maybe Thomas Dimitrov isn't out. And again, it goes back to something I've said a number of times. Arthur Blank's never fired a GM in 17 years as the owner. So there's a chance that streak will continue for 18 years.
Yeah. Again, what is it? 9 months too late. So, I mean, Sanu should have been gone before the season started. They should have, put their tokens into Calvin.
You meant Vic Beasley, right? Vic Beasley should have gone before this. That's what you meant to say, right?
No, I don't. I think that they screwed up by not bringing in a defensive coordinator to help Dan Quinn.
Well, that's besides the point, I guess you can say.
Certainly, with scheming and help from the sidelines, you're not going to get that from Thomas Dimitrov, and an empty seat that's not really there for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things they mismanage. For me, it starts with Vic Beasley. The coordinators I didn't necessarily agree with. I mean, I was cool, with Dan Quinn assuming those reins and trusted that he could maybe get as much as he can out of this unit. I was wrong to place that trust in him for that. I mean, but I think you can also say, personnel too. He overtrusted his personnel. The whole players not plays thing. That's the thing I keep coming back to that kind of did him in this season. But yeah, that's kind of where I'd start with the problems as far as.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of stuck. If Vic Beasley was really on the trade block, don't you think he'd be gone already? I mean, I'm sure they've gotten offers.
Well, I don't know if you saw, the tweet from Jeff Schultz, but he's been on the block, but his market, because of the fact that this past year has not gone well, his market has cooled. So it's not like everyone's jumping at the bit. There's some other names out there. I saw a tweet, Yannick Ngakoue, who's on an expiring contract in Jacksonville. He's a easily markedly better player than Vic Beasley. So, I'm sure teams are maybe calling, inquiring about him and would rather have him than Vic Beasley. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Now, again, it's not like it's a foregone conclusion at this point that he's not going to be traded. there's a lot of back and forth sometimes with these types of moves, but I don't necessarily say because he's not traded now, he might not be traded Monday or Tuesday before the deadline. I still think that's kind of rushing the judgment a bit.
Yeah, deadline spur action, as they say. So, the market really won't heat up until basically now, between now and Tuesday.
Right, which is why it leaves me curious to see why teams would, you figure if he was really on the trade block, Falcons would probably take even the minimum, which is probably a 7th round pick. I mean, if it was really that important to move Vic Beasley, don't you think?
Well, I don't know if they're, because again, I don't. The benefit of trading Vic Beasley is what the salary cap space, I guess you'd say, Aaron, is the top benefit.
Yeah,
the temperature maybe, and the building.
So a PR move,
basically.
I guess, but at this point, it's.
But yeah, they'll get if they only move him for a 7th round pick. They'll get criticized for basically only getting a 7th round pick on a 1st round pick as well. So
I mean, I'm not so sure. A lot of my comments that I've seen on Twitter is they'll trade Vic Beasley for a Chick-fil-A gift card. So
no, I think fans won't care, but I think the media will certainly. That will be a story.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. But yeah, I don't. Again, to answer your question, I think they want to try to get as much as they can for him. So again, negotiations back and forth. If that's all they'll get for him, then I think, like Aaron said, they might just try to save that face and ride it out because they've already kind of made this mistake already. As a 7th round pick, really worth doing this for? I don't know.
Well, I think maybe Dan Quinn's keeping him. I think he wants to keep him, and I think he wants to possibly re-sign him for like a really, for whatever the minimum his contract.
Dan Quinn's not going to be here to re-sign him.
You don't think so?
No, it's a foregone conclusion that he's
the only. I think the only possibility that Dan Quinn could save his job is if they run the table.
That's a little too much, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, what Quinn brings is, even Julio's sticking up for Quinn, and I just.
Well, again, I tweeted this out. It's never been a confusion that Dan Quinn hasn't been a player's coach. He's a player's coach. Like, players like the guy, but just because you like the guy and want to play for him doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work out. Like, it takes more than just that.
Any credit to the first? Did anybody see that in the first quarter? That was special right there. That was Dan Quinn right there for like the first 3 drives all the way, and then there was a couple misses in pass protection, and then it all just went straight in the ground.
Yeah, I still didn't like the first drive when I rewatched the game. First drive for the Falcons defense. They had a 3rd and 1. Grady Jarrett misses a tackle for loss in the backfield. Okay, whatever. 3rd and 8, 3-man rush, no pressure. Surprise, surprise, they had the conversion. And then 3rd and 12, just a regular conversion. Nothing really special about it. It's just Rams converted. Isaiah Oliver couldn't really keep up with Robert Woods. Again, that. I don't know if you want to place that all on Dan Quinn, but how bad and how poor they've been on 3rd downs and getting off the field, I feel like both parties deserve the blame, and that's why, again, it hasn't worked out. It is what it's unfortunate because, again, I like Dan Quinn too. I wish it worked out. I love the culture that he's brought to this team. And, maybe he can bring it to another franchise. I think the Washington Redskins might be a prime example of an organization that could use Dan Quinn, and maybe he gets right back on his feet as a head coach again and brings some function to the dysfunction in Washington. He'd be a great candidate for that, and I'd wish him well. But X's and O's wise, again, we've talked about it repeatedly on the show. That's not necessarily his forte, so he needs to have the right personnel to work his scheme, and the Falcons haven't quite gotten that, and hopefully they can get that under a new regime.
Yeah, I don't have any other thoughts other than that.
Fair.
So do you have anything else for us, John?
No, I'm just gonna watch, and can I get a prediction for tonight's game, Lakers and Clippers, before I leave?
Let's go with the Clippers.
Yeah, I got the Clippers to this one.
Cool. All right, I'm
right, John. Appreciate it as always, man. Guys. Have a good one.
All right. So guys, that link to join the show is in the chat on YouTube. So if you guys want to join the show, we're planning on doing an hour, so we got a couple more minutes and can take a couple more thoughts on things. But I guess this is a good opportunity, Matt.
I guess
to
while we're
get
waiting, I'll give my my Austin Hooper takes and why I think it's ridiculous that the Falcons would even entertain such an offer. For me, I'll start with the fact that I think the reason trading Sanu made a lot of sense was because of the emergence and the presence of Austin Hooper. I mean, you kind of had a guy that can be that intermediate, reliable safety blanket that Matt Ryan kind of had turned to, Mohamed Sanu, and why I would always pound the table for Sanu, because you needed guys like that in tight games to move the chains. So now that you have Hooper emerging, and being a Pro Bowl level player, being a top 5 tight end per Pro Football Focus, why would you tear that down? I mean, this is still a talented receiving core. Don't let one bad season, which in my mind you can largely attribute to coaching mishaps and blunders, kind of get in the way of that and cloud that, because I feel like that's what people are doing right now. When they're saying and looking at this roster and saying, oh, we need to tear it down because it's too top heavy. I mean, as far as the offense goes, sure, you got Matt Ryan's contract. Sure, you got Julio Jones' contract. But other than that, I mean, we've talked about Devontae Freeman and what they're potentially going to do there. I think he's likely the candidate to be a post-June 1 cut if those are available, given the ramifications of the new CBA. So you're tearing down one there. You got rid of Sanu's. And Alex Mack is the only other one there. Other than that, you kind of have cost-effective, affordable options on your offense. So you're really not that top-heavy. For those that might say, well, you can replace, a Hooper and Sanu with the assets you get. Well, are you really improving your team at that point? Because the way I look at it, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're trading a wide receiver, trading a tight end, just so you can draft a wide receiver and a tight end. Again, there's no guarantees in the draft. The draft's a big crapshoot, and especially at a position like tight end, where in my mind it's one of the toughest to adapt to from college to the pros. So again, you have a known commodity in Austin Hooper, a guy who's emerged into one of the premier. If he's not in tier 1, he's definitely there at the top of tier 2 tight ends. Why tear that down? I've said this point as far as, how I value tight ends. The NFL is a matchup-driven league, and I think the tight end is the ultimate weapon in the pass game. Because, I mean, you try to put a safety on them, they're likely too small. You try to put a linebacker on them, they're likely too slow. So, in my mind, the Falcons shouldn't be subtracting tight ends. I think they should be adding to the mission. I was pounding the table this past draft for a guy like Foster Moreau to pair up with Austin Hooper. Didn't happen. Hopefully, whatever coaching regime they bring in can realize something like that, because I think the Falcons should try to be emulating what the Eagles have done with Ertz and Goddard and feature more, 2 tight end sets. I mean, that Kyle Shanahan loved the multiple tight end sets and had great success with it. And it's partly because you can keep the opposing defenses in base defense. And at that point, you can manipulate them and kind of target the mismatches. So when you have multiple tight ends out there, especially ones that are both threats in the receiving game and can block for you in the run game, it just makes your offense that much more dynamic. So we really shouldn't be tearing down the receiver group. We should be building it up. And again, hopefully the new coaching regime, subscribes to that model. And then lastly, the last point I'll make is I just think Matt Ryan has put in too much time in the offseason with Austin Hooper the last several summers, which has been well documented, that, again, it's silly and foolish and would be a huge mistake if you just did away with all that time and all that effort that you got to build that rapport, which, again, we highlighted it at the top with an inexperienced player like Russell Gage. Rapport matters. And when you build up that rapport and try to take that away from your franchise quarterback, your cornerstone player, it's only going to set your team back. So, again, to sum it up, I think, passing on Austin Hooper for the point of building up your defense, sure, I mean, maybe that makes your defense better if you hit on those picks, but you're certainly going to set your offense back. I mean, what was once a talented receiving core is now Julio and Calvin Ridley, and not much else behind it for the most part. And, we've seen Julio can get nicked up at times, and you have to worry as he gets older You got to monitor his reps. So by having a young ascending player like Hooper in the fold, I think keeps the depth there, keeps the weapons there in case one of those guys did go down with an injury. You still have a dynamic number 2 option in Austin Hooper. So again, seeing these takes that Hooper, should be traded or on the block, I wouldn't pay a tight end $10 million a year. I mean, again, going back to what I said, I think tight ends are the ultimate weapon in the pass game, and get as many as you can. If you can get a guy that's established like Austin Hooper and blossoming into a real star, then pay him what he's worth. I mean, again, this is what happens when you draft good players. I mean, I see far too many takes about, the Falcons missing on draft picks. Well, when they hit on a draft pick and now you want to let them go because you're afraid of paying them, it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too. Like both can't be true. So again, they've hit on a draft pick in Austin Hooper. He's become one of Matt Ryan's more reliable targets. Pay the man.
Yeah, I mean, I can sum her up a little bit more succinctly than Matt did, but yeah,
I'm usually all over the place at times, but
no. You made some good points. It took you about 30 minutes to do it, but yeah, man, you did a great job. No, I can't make fun of anybody who talks too much. I think trading Hooper would be a terrible idea. It just doesn't make any sense, as you say, because Hooper's a young ascending player, probably could play another 5 to 7 really good seasons as a starter. Whether or not he's putting up production comparable to what he's doing this year, I guess remains to be seen. That depends on who's his play caller. Lord knows if you get a Bruce Arians disciple in here next year, he's not going to throw to the tight end at all. So maybe then, in that case, hindsight will say that you should have traded Austin Hooper. But outside of that one scenario, Hooper, as Matt mentioned, and one of the things I've said for a while now is like, Julio's not getting any younger, and the foundation of this passing attack, and it is a passing league, despite everybody's insistence on wanting to #establish the run. It's a passing league, and the foundation of your passing game for the next 5 years that Matt Ryan's going to be the quarterback is going to be Calvin Ridley and Austin Hooper. And you can build a solid supporting cast around those guys with second and third and fourth round picks and whatnot, but you need to have that foundation there. Otherwise, you're going to be back in the same situation. I mean, we knew that, how long did it take the Falcons to replace Tony Gonzalez? It took them like 7 years because they knew when they acquired him in 2009 that they were going to have to replace him sooner rather than later. And they didn't get a good replacement to him until they drafted Austin Hooper in 2016. So, like, do you want to go back to 7 more years of not having a good tight end? And again, I know a lot of people will sit here and say, well, Hooper is replaceable. But, in the point you said about paying him, if you look at Mohamed Sanu's contract and you sort of, adjust for inflation in terms of what the salary cap was in 2016 when we paid him that and what the salary cap will be estimated to be in 2020, Mohamed Sanu's contract would be worth about $8.5 million in 2020 dollars. So if you don't value Austin Hooper at $8.5 million, like, he does the same thing that Mohamed Sanu does. He blocks, he catches, he moves the chains. He's a red zone target. In fact, he's been better at those things the last couple of years in a lot of ways than Sanu has been. So, like, if basically I'm sitting here saying like $8.5 million should be a pretty fair price for somebody, and so if you're just going to haggle about Hooper making $9 million or $9.5 million or $10 million, you can justify that because, as Matt said, he already has that rapport with Matt Ryan. You're not bringing in a new guy like you were with Mohamed Sanu, who's never played with Matt Ryan, and then have to sort of worry about whether or not they're going to get on the same page. Him and Austin Hooper, Matt Ryan and Austin Hooper, he's his security blanket and is going to be so for the next 5+ years. So, to me, the idea that Hooper's not worth X amount of dollars, it's fascinating to me how many people always are very, very frugal when it comes to paying the hometown guys, the homegrown guys. It's like, oh, Grady Jarrett's not worth that, and Deion Jones is not worth that, and Ricardo Allen's not worth that, and Austin Hooper's not worth that. Vic Beasley's not worth that. But, like, it is one of those things where, like, but when we go out and pay for Jamon Brown or James Carpenter or Mohamed Sanu or Alex Mack or whoever, people are like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Because they don't know who these players are, but because they only watch one team and they watch Austin Hooper, and they can remember those times in 2017 where he dropped a bunch of passes, and they remember 5 times where he's missed the block. And because we're emotional about our football team, they get really fired up and they get really mad at Austin Hooper. And so they can remember all the times they got pissed off at Austin Hooper. And so therefore they're like, oh, he's not worth that type of money. And they just forget about all the good things he does. It's kind of ridiculous to me. So I guess I did wind up talking just as long as you did that. So
yeah, I mean, it's a classic swap. And that's the way I put it in my last article that I wrote about a month ago at Rise Up Breeder is, you're swapping out Mohamed Sanu's contract for Austin Hooper. And if you were okay with that and you were happy with the production and what Mohamed Sanu brought to the table, then there's no reason that you shouldn't be happy with what Austin Hooper can bring. Because again, as you said, he's 24, 25. He's only going to go up from here, and he's got, 5, 6, 7 years to play. So you should be happy with that. And trust me when I tell you, they can afford it. They can make it work. There's other avenues that I'm sure they're going to explore in cuts and guys that we've talked about, guys that are on the trade block. Those are the guys that they're looking to cut because they don't necessarily factor into the long-term future. But Austin Hooper should and will, impact the future of the Falcons, be a part of the Falcons' future in my mind. I don't think there's any really doubt in my mind about it. I think this trade rumor stuff is all just, again, it's rumors, and because of the fact that the Falcons are not having a good season, they're just going to go down the list of who's on an expiring contract. Hooper's one of them. He's having a great year. Teams need tight ends, so he's going to be a natural candidate to get his name thrown out there. But from all the reports, from the Jeff Schultz report, they want to make it work. They've said he's next, and I believe it, and I think he will be next. And that's why I think this Mohamed Sanu trade is beneficial because it saves them, I think, about a little over $3 million, pushes their total to about, I think, 5 at this point. So they can kind of sort of work on getting an Austin Hooper contract, together this season, kind of in that November timeframe that they did several years ago with, Robert Alford and Ryan Schrader. And really, just you have to kind of worry about the signing bonus. And I've been projecting and kind of throwing together some contract scenarios, and maybe $12 million for a signing bonus for Austin Hooper. So that would be $2.4 million for every year for 5 years. So they only need $2.4 million to get it done this year, and then you kind of have them locked up for the foreseeable future. So the savings that they get from the Sanu deal could potentially go towards that, and I'm kind of hoping that's where they're headed after they get the rest of these trades and players in line this next week before the deadline. I'm hoping that's their next step, Dimitroff's next step in the front office.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Matt, you have thoughts on before we get out of here? I have one last thought I want to give. Matt mentioned it, that the 12 gauge was a critical part of the Falcons offense, particularly their short yardage game. Dirk Cutter hasn't necessarily used it correctly in my eyes this season, but it is what it is. That's just Dirk Cutter for you. But I do feel like the Falcons potentially have an option to potentially replace him, not Russell Gage, which would make sense. I think we did see some wildcat with Russell Gage during the preseason. But if they do wind up elevating Danny Etling with this free roster spot, given the injury to Matt Ryan, he would be a perfect candidate to sort of fill in that role. You got to figure out a way to justify activating him on game day as the third quarterback.
Well, if they do it for Kenyon Barner as simply the punt returner, certainly I think they'll have no problem rationalizing.
You're not going to get any argument from me, certainly.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So that'll be fun. Yeah.
And maybe just maybe they play Sherrod Eastman at strong safety. I don't know. I'll still be banging the table for that all season long, and this off season, I don't know what's going on with that. But what else you got, Matt, before we duck out of here?
No, not much. I said my piece on Hooper. I mean, if anyone's wondering if there's anything I'm looking forward to in the Seattle game, it's Russell Gage season. I want to see more of him. Hopefully we see more of him. The interesting thing, Mohamed Sanu has been the leading snap getter of the Falcons wide receiver core for like the last 2 years. So it'll be interesting how they divvy that share up. I think it might be a 50-50 split with Gage and Hardy, since Gage and Hardy have been getting the same amount of snaps kind of each game this year. So we'll see who makes the most of those. Aaron has always thrown out the theory of, can Justin Hardy give you the same level of production that Mohamed Sanu can? So again, I don't know if because of who the play caller is, we'll get a good read on that, but it'll be interesting to test that theory out over the next 9 games. But yeah, Russell Gage season is probably the only thing I'm looking forward to seeing in this Seattle game. It will be interesting because if Matt Schaub is the quarterback and Matt Ryan's streak's broken, Gage and Schaub should have some chemistry, being that they had a lot of work together, as the backups in the preseason and all that. So again, look out for Russell Gage. But other than that, again, the results don't matter at this point. We just want to evaluate some of the younger guys on the roster and see what we have there long term. And I'm sure the future coaching staff would appreciate that as well. So, yep, that's about it for me.
Yeah, I mean, the point I'll bring up with, Sanu spent about 85% of his snaps in the slot this year, which was a big uptick over what has been the last couple of seasons, where it's usually around 60, 65%. And, piggybacking off what Matt said, I am very curious how the Falcons sort of adjust their offense now with, their high usage of 11 personnel, those 3 wide receiver sets. Will we see Justin Hardy? Because Russell Gage really hasn't played much at all in the slot this season. He's primarily been the guy that's been stepping in to spell Julio when he needs a breather. And they also like to bring in Hardy to spell guys like Sanu and Ridley when he needs a breather. So it seems like Hardy is the natural candidate to fill some of those slot snaps. But you would also like to see them get Julio more in the slot, because he's not playing as much there this year as he is in the last couple of seasons. Ridley certainly hasn't been playing nearly as much in the slot. So I am definitely curious to sort of see how the Falcons sort of fill the Mohamed Sanu void and how they do divvy up the snaps. And Gage is a player that I've sort of thought was a better option inside, has a skill set that fits better with a slot receiver than as an outside receiver. And so if he does get some more opportunities in the slot, I am very curious to sort of see how he performs in that role. But I do think, again, the Falcons have 4 players potentially that can easily fill the void of Mohamed Sanu in theory. But because Dirk Cutter is calling plays, theories kind of go out the window as far as this offense goes. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And if Matt Schaub does wind up playing for Matt Ryan, because my guess is, again, I don't have any information here, but it seems like most indicators of the Falcons are going to be smart and rest Matt Ryan and give him an extra week during the bye week to get that ankle right and not have him rush out there to save a season that is already lost. So, get Matt Schaub some reps, and I'll be very curious to sort of see how Cutter adjusts his play calling with Schaub in the lineup, and hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of the sort of the play action based offense, because I don't think he really wants to get into a straight drop back passing game with all the shotgun stuff that he uses with Matt Ryan, with Matt Schaub. So, not to sit here and be like, this could be the best Falcon game in terms of their offense, because I think that'd be pretty ridiculous. I just do think from a philosophical, from an identity standpoint, from a game planning standpoint, this might be the game potentially that where the offense at least looks more like what we've seen the last couple of years. Whether it gets executed and operated to that level, I think is pretty doubtful at this point in time. But I do think we might see more of that sort of Shanahan style of offense this week against Seattle, particularly if Matt Schaub winds up starting.
I could just imagine the takes on Twitter if what you're saying comes true and they look good and give Seattle a run for their money.
Throwing dimes to Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones on the field. I mean, he looked good in that final drive, but he was going up against the Rams backups. So.
Yeah, and I always think whenever a backup comes in, no team's ever game planning for the backup, so you always see the backup have a good deal of success. So we'll see now a week of studying. And again, I'm sure they're studying for both Matt Ryan and Schaub, but having a game plan for Schaub, we'll see how much success he can really have I'm not getting my hopes up, but yeah, it'll just be something on Twitter if Shaw plays well and the Matt Ryan haters come out more in droves and continue to push this crazy trade stuff. And yeah, I'm not
Schaub is my guy. Matt Ryan is my guy. I enjoy playing the game of Schaub is better than Matt Ryan. I enjoy that because people, a couple of people don't understand the sarcasm and they get pretty fired up about it, and you have a little bit of fun with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Falcons. We'll see what they do. This is really a Dirk Cutter game if Matt Schaub starts. Again, I'm not expecting the Falcons to win, but if they play well, it'll be because they had a good game plan. If they don't play well, it'll be because they didn't have a good game plan, because that's what needs to happen when you have backups at a bunch of positions, like quarterback, like in the slot with Sanu gone, and whatever happens at the running back position with Ito Smith potentially out as well with the concussion. So this is going to be a potential, this would be a good game to tell really what Dirk Cutter is really bringing to the table as a play caller.
Yep.
Well, guys, we appreciate everybody for joining us on today's episode. Sorry to cut it short. I know we've gone on some 2-hour extravaganzas recently, but, want to, I don't know, just get in, get out, talk.
Yeah,
Sanu,
there's not a lot of positive stuff going on with the actual on-field product. We were fortunate to get a Sanu trade this morning and have a little bit more to talk about. And we'll see if we have more to talk about, with other trades in the next week, and potentially maybe talking about, coach firing with Dan Quinn, since the bye week has always seemed to be that deadline maybe where it happens. So yeah, that's really the news going on in Falcons, country right now. As far as that goes, there's not a whole lot we can get from the actual on-field stuff. So again, we get more callers, we'll extend the show. But again, we appreciate Vlad, we appreciate John for calling in, but it seems like the phone lines are a little bit quiet tonight, so we thought we'd cut it short with an hour.
Yeah. GA Red Clay, why is Dan Quinn still here? Because he is. I don't know. Yeah, next week we're going to have a fun show for you guys. We'll have a couple of guests on. So we'll certainly have some fun conversations with some guests, do a little bi-week roundtable for next week's show. And yeah, definitely you guys want to call in for that show as well to chat with some of those guests that we're going to have. We should be able to confirm with some of those guys over the weekend, and we should be able to announce that over the weekend, sort of who the guests are that we're going to have. But we're pretty confident that we'll be able to book those guys. And some of them have been past guests on this show. And, if you guys want to call in, the link is on the YouTube. Of course, you need to subscribe to the YouTube Pro Football Central. Hit the bell icon. Definitely, you want to like this video, share this video, guys. Get more people involved. Tell everybody, put out the good word about how great this show is, and how smooth I look on camera, and Matt and his clean white Falcons hat, all those sorts of things. And definitely check us out on Facebook as well, Falcons Central Radio. Follow the Twitter of the show, Falcons PFC. That's a good way to get some questions in if you want to have them answered on the show. And of course, you can follow Matt and I on Twitter. Our handles are on the screen below us, but for you audio listeners, I am at FalcFans. Matt is at Matt Caroly, MattKaroly. And of course, check us out at ProFootballCentral.com, where you can get the audio version of the show, as well as the links to where you can listen to the audio version of the show as well on your favorite podcast platform. Yeah. Any last words, Matt, before we get out?
No, you nailed it, man.
All right, guys, we appreciate you joining us, and have a good night. And don't worry, we're just one more Falcons game away from just having a week off from terrible football. So enjoy your bye week when it comes up.